Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, Randy and I are going to continue our discussion of careers in the military. And in particular, today, we're going to talk about what it's like to actually spend a 20-year or longer career in the military. Is it a good idea financially? Is it a good idea physically? And maybe how things have changed since you've been in the military, Randy, but how people should think about it. And I would start by saying, I have been I write a career column about what it's like to succeed in a business career. And I give advice to people who are starting out their careers or in the middle of their careers, how to do well. And I've been surprised by some of the feedback I've been getting from a lot of people who feel like their prospects for having a good career in business aren't so great anymore, that companies are not looking out for employees' best interests, that it's difficult to have a successful career. It surprises me. There's a lot of cynicism and worry and fear. I guess I can understand where people are coming from. I wonder, how does it feel to you when you talk to people who are in the military? Do they consider the military to be a good employer? Do you consider the military to be a good employer? I know at different times you've given advice about there's lots of ways that you can go about being smart about your career and in the military in terms of taking advantage of what's on offer, free money lying around, and there seems to be a fair amount of it. But you just start with that high level question. Would you personally consider the military to be a good career? And I mean that just in general, not can you succeed at it, but is it something that people should consider as a totally acceptable way to make their way in life?
I think so. I fully believe that it is, yes. I also think that what you're going to get out of it is obviously depends on what you put in it, but it also depends on the planning, the research you've done. And it also depends on where you are in your life. If you're making six figures in a corporate job and then want to go to the military and think that you're going to start there, you're wrong. And will you even in there, you're probably wrong too. But if you're an 18-year-old who just got off shift at McDonald's, is this a way forward? I mean, free health for if you're married, free health for you and your family, free dental for you and your family. If you're coming in as a level one private, you're making right off the bat somewhere between 1,700 and 2,000 a month. And then if you have a wife, you're making more than that. And you're also going to have a housing allowance too that goes to help you guys pay for rent, depending on your location. It's location dependent and it's also rank dependent. So as a private, you're going to get less than a general, obviously, but you're going to have some extra money on top of that $1,800 you're making. And that's just basic training, right? After basic training, most people get promoted almost within, if they don't get promoted at the end of basic training within 6 months, they're getting promoted to the next level, which is another couple $100. And then within a year, they're getting promoted to the next level. No one's expected to stay at the first level longer than a year. If you are, someone has really done you wrong, you haven't taken care of yourself, or you've done something wrong. Those are your three options. If you're still a level one private E1 at the end of a year, something's gone awry. And then you can usually get promoted all the way to the fourth level of being enlisted really without a problem within the next first couple of years, because there's actually your command will get a note when you reach a certain threshold, like, hey, this guy should get promoted unless you have a reason why he shouldn't get promoted. And then it'll be like an automatic thing. And then when you get to the higher levels of management, the sergeant, staff sergeant, sergeant first class and stuff, you actually have to go through some hoops to qualify at your profession, because every profession's got different requirements to get to the next level. Because like I said in a previous episode, it's a pyramid system. There's only so many manager levels in each profession in the military. So you're not competing against, just like you aren't in the real world. I'm not competing against the accountant for the engineer, the senior engineering job. It's the same thing in the military. In that sense, as a young high school or college dropout or college, I don't think college is right for me person, especially if you have a family, it's probably really beneficial. The free healthcare and dental alone, depending on what kind of problems your family has, is going to really equal out financially.
All right. Good and clear answer there. I had a question. And I'm not sure if it fits here, but it has occurred to me several times, probably since I've started talking with you and hearing you describe the military so well. Is it conceivable and potentially a good idea for someone who's 30 or even 40. Do you know of anybody who enlists at later in life? And can those people, I guess the physical challenge is the one that makes me think that that would be tricky, but can you do it also not in your early life and be successful?
Yeah. So, especially after 9/11, there's a lot of people that age that said, "Hey, I want to serve. I think this is a good cause," and they joined that age. It also depends on where, like I said, where you are in your life. If you're quitting
Right.
a $200,000 year
You're
and,
not
and
doing
that's
that for
what you want to
money.
do with
Right.
your life, if you already have a bunch of money in the bank and that's what you want to do with your life, you go ahead. But you're probably making a mistake if you want to retain be financially wealthy where you're already on the kind of the right path to do that before. I, I've known people that joined at late 20s, 30s that were making pretty good money doing like air conditioning and heating installations and stuff like that. And just decided that this is the way they wanted to go. I had a friend of mine in the Rangers who was 30, who was an investor, like a in stock investor or something, and lost a crap load of money and was just like, I'm out of here. And it was hiding from his debtors in the military
Oh
because
no.
there's a government sanctioned, I don't know what you would call it, but basically, if you join the military and you go from making a lot of money to a lot less money, then all of your creditors have to reduce their interest rates to like some insignificant amount or just stop interest altogether or something like that. It's the Soldier Airmen's, I can't remember what the name of it is, but basically, if you want to use that to your advantage and that's your last bankruptcy isn't an option. And even if bankruptcy is an option, then and you lose all your credit, maybe the army is a good place to get started while your credit's getting built up or something like that. There's a lot of ways you can look at this. If you want to do a career change, and you want the army to pay for the academics of it. If you want to be an airplane mechanic or whatever floats your boat, then you can go to the recruiter and say, "Hey, do you have this job in the Air Force, the Army, Marines, whatever?" Usually, like the Navy is considered one of the better communicators since you have a boat in the middle of nowhere with nothing, and then they have these incredible communication systems and stuff. And of course, the Air Force is about flying for the most part, and the Army is about trying on the ground somewhere. I would go if anyone is considering going to a recruiter. I would go to all of them and see what they have to offer because each one has different bonuses for different things at different times, and they also have different. If you know what you're talking about, if you're actually intelligent about what you're trying to do, and you know about intelligence or communications or cyber, and you're saying, "Do they teach me this? Do they teach me this?" And then you can get pamphlets. You can talk to people who are actually doing the job and you can get real answers and say, yeah, we'll teach you that. You'll get, not only will it teach you that, you'll get experience it. So when you get out, you have experience at the job you want to do. So
So you
I'd say depends.
I like that. Good lawyer answer. But no, of course, life is complex. So you do need to deal with it and answers are nuanced. But when I see an organization that offers a significant amount of benefits and a lot of different ways to compensate people for joining them, I usually think they have to do it, right? Because people don't give away money for free. So if you're getting free health and free dental and free education and your base pay and your housing allowance and the GI Bill and all the other ways that our soldiers are supported, it is sure it's because we're happy for them and grateful for the service that they're performing. But I presume it is because they need to, because the job itself has elements that are not so attractive. So is it the physical toll that it takes upon you? Is it the fact that you have less flexibility than you might have in other roles? What is it that you think makes the military need to compensate people for serving? And I may not be
Well,
describing that accurately. That's just my sense of it from outside that, hey, they got to pay you that much money because otherwise people wouldn't do it.
I know what you're saying. So first of all, military's I think it's kind of bad rap. Maybe it's got an accurate rap. People think of the military in one way. They watch Stripes, they watch Full Metal Jacket, they watch other movies, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to do that every day." But they don't realize that once you get through your training, your basic training, your individual training, and let's say you're an X-ray tech. What does your daily life look like as an X-ray tech? You will be required to do physical training 3 times a week at 6:30 in the morning, probably, unless you're on shift work, and then you won't. You could have the night
Hmm.
shift. So therefore, maybe someone's going to be organizing some physical training at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for you. I don't know. I don't know how shift work works, but there's probably got to be an X-ray tech on call at midnight sometimes. So where's that guy come from? Now I know they do a lot of contractors now, and they didn't do that so much in the past, but there are people in the military that are working as X-ray techs, for instance, or lab techs or something. And so what does their life look like? Most of your average person in the military that's not in the infantry or combat arms or something where being physically fit is really super important, because you're going to be out there and you have to be able to march at a moment's notice 20 miles, and you have to be able to move the heavy rounds into the guns and whatever. The other 70 or 80% of the Army that supports the combat arms is doing physical training 3 times a week at 6:30 in the morning. And they're going and then they breakfast, they shower and shave, and then they start work at 9 o'clock. And then they do a job in cyber, or they do a job in administrative or HR. They have the HR specialists, or they go analyze intelligence or something like that in a room behind a computer at a desk most of the time. And then they take lunch, and then they come back from lunch and do it for a couple more hours. And then at 4:30 or 5, they may have a little meeting and say, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. And then they go home. And most of the people who have been in the Army for 4 or 5 years, home means they go off base somewhere at a home that they rent, because they have a dislocation allowance that allows them to rent a house. If you have a family, that's what it means. If you're of a lower rank, or if you're single, you may live on base, but you live in a little apartment, or maybe you have your own little house on the base or something.
Now, this is good to hear, Randy, both. And even, first of all, the idea that there might be as many as 70% of people in support functions versus people who are actively doing the hard physical things is interesting to hear. And secondly, if I'm honest, even the idea that those people are doing PT 3 times a week at 6:30, that's not really a bad thing, is it either? If you look at how unhealthy people get who don't have someone helping them stay fit, that's a real problem for a lot of people, is how do you manage your life and your career with regular physical fitness? So not really being able to have a choice, and just some taskmaster is making you stay focused on your fitness, is an indirect, pretty significant benefit, I would have said.
And when you get to when you get to the elites, the combat elites, the special operations, the Rangers, special forces, we have trainers and nutritionists that work with us, and we're working out 6:30, 5 times a week. But we have trainers we have really good trainers. When I was there, this guy was like the strength trainer for the hockey team, the state hockey team, and this guy was a trainer for an MMA fighter. We hired them away from other people. They were good trainers and nutritionists and things like that. So that just started happening in the last 10 years, but that's something that you can look forward to if you get to that level.
Well, I'm definitely going to look forward to exploring that with you, Randy, when we talk about maybe the nutrition episode. Presumably you've learned something about it. I don't want to get sidetracked now, but I've taken note. That's an interesting point. Okay, so we've now discussed some of the parameters of financially, and not just financially, though. What are some of the benefits associated with pursuing a career in the military? We started to get into this just a little bit in an earlier episode. The physical consequences, if you are in one of those heavy physical jobs, might add up. You referred to 2 elements of it. Maybe I want to see if you have anything more you want to say about it. One, there is, in your experience, and it's anecdotal, but nonetheless, a difference between how it takes a toll on men versus women. And 2, even for men, for everybody, there is a possibility of disability that you can't exclude, because you're in dangerous situations and you're challenging yourself and pushing yourself all the time. So you might find yourself with a chronic injury or worse that then is going to be with you. How would you, first of all, how can a person thinking about, hey, I want to do something like what Randy did, how would you now advise yourself 30 years ago to say, look, this is how I want you to think about what's coming? And would you still do the same thing again? Or I know you can't predict what the future is going to hold ever, and you have to take chances to become successful. But nonetheless, how do you weigh up the physical side of things for the people who want to go the hardcore route that you did?
Yeah. So that's difficult, obviously. Like you said, when I started, probably for the first 15 or 20 years. That's 15 or 20 years where I wasn't really didn't have physical trainers. And this is before everyone was rolling the thing of the future for stretching. And we had some basic stretches that we did. But I would say for 10 or 15 years, most of the time when I was left on my own, I didn't stretch. I'm like, I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go run a marathon. I'm going to go rucking. What I'm going to go, whatever. And so I just abuse my body. And I think that's people, even in the civilian world, if they don't learn to stretch and prepare for these events, that they're eventually going to get hurt. Now, you can get away with it for a while when you're young. But I remember my dad, because he used to run when we lived in Holland, and he was reading, he read a Runner's World. I was in like track or cross country and I was stretching. He was like, I just read an article in Runner's World that said stretching is bad for you. I was like, I don't know what to say to that, Dad. I don't know. You're smarter than I am. You're older than I am. So if that's what you say, but there's always weird advice coming out of the books, the newest article in a magazine or whatever. And it's always caveated with, because we're saying this because of blah, 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 if you're doing this or whatever, and you don't read the whole article or something like that. As far as the physical problems that I ended up with, which are mostly attributed to jumping out of airplanes and landing with your knees, and also rucking, marching with rucks, heavy rucks, which just hammers your knees. My biggest problems are my knees, my shoulders, and my lower back. And it's obvious what I did, and I'm not sure I could have done anything different. I did tear an ACL, and maybe that was a part of stretching, or maybe that was just a bad turn of the knee. Who knows? But I don't think I could have done anything else to minimize the jumping. I have 125 jumps, which on a static line with a backpack attached to you is a lot. Not a lot of people. They actually give you a little medal at 100 because it's so uncommon. And it's hard to get that many in the military because when you're on a parachute status, you're required to jump 4 times a year. And in order to jump, it's an all-day event. You have to do a pre-jump preparation. You have to go out there, go to where the airplane's taking off, wherever that is, if it's an hour away or whatever. You have to wait for the airplane to take off. You're going to get there early so you don't miss the plane. And then you have to get your chute on. So you have to get there an hour early. Then you get on the plane if it's on time. And then the plane flies to where they're going to drop you out of the plane, which doesn't have to be right where you are. It could be an hour away as well. And then once you hit the ground, you have to get picked up by a truck and driven back somewhere in order to take care of the chute so that they can repack it. So that's an hour or 2 of your life. So it's an all day event. And so they decide to do that 4 times a year to see you're qualified to jump and you're ready to jump at any time. And so really most people only do it 4 times a year because they got other stuff to do in their life. Some people will what's called chase jumps, but most of us just do it 4 times a year. So if you do it 4 times a year for 20 years, that's 80 times. And so if you chased a bunch of jumps, you might have got more, but usually in 20 years, and you only jump if you're in an airborne unit.
How'd you get to such a big number, Randy?
I did 32 years for one. And the second thing is if you're in a ranger unit, you may jump 8 times a year because you're practicing for missions and your mission is to take over an airfield. So you may, attack. Oh, you did it wrong. Okay. Tomorrow we're going to jump again and do it again. So we jump again the next day and do it again. We may do more than 4, but a lot of times these airborne units are only going to jump 4 times a year and I've practiced jumping out of an airplane, out of a truck, where we're driving down the middle of the field where we would have jumped out of the airplane. I have a pickup truck or something. And then the pickup's going really slow and they're like, no, and everyone's jumping out of the back of a pickup truck onto the sand and rolling and then practicing whatever we're practicing because we did the airplane. That's when weather was bad or the airplane got canceled or something like that.
So you're making me feel a little bit better in the sense that, of course, you were in for a longer period of time than a lot of people, 32 years. You sought out challenges that were definitely physically tougher than a lot of people would ever do, or indeed need to do, depending on which choice of career that they chose. And you're still up and walking around, yeah, you have maybe knees, shoulders, lower back, ACL. There's a few spots, but I think what I am taking away, and maybe what if tell me if this is wrong, but what a listener should take away is it's not going to necessarily physically come at an incredibly high cost if you choose a normal career in the military.
Because a normal career is going to be, if you look at a normal life, I hope that most people do some physical training in the mornings, go to the gym or whatever, and you have access to all the military gyms for free. And so you go, instead of going to the gym 3 days a week, you're doing it with a team that's motivating you.
Is it timely now to talk about retiring from the military or what a person should think about in terms of how to set themselves up for successfully leading? I'm not sure the right way to get into this one. What's the angle here? Is it the money side of things? Is it
So,
the sort of mental fitness side of
so
things?
I think for me, obviously, when I hit the 10-year mark, I was like, I'm here. I might as well finish 20. You can't retire earlier than 20 unless you get medically retired, which I don't think anybody desires. Usually it means you're hurt in some way and that you can't function in your job. So they're going to let you go and give you a medical retirement of so much a month for the rest of your life. But so you got to look at the 20-year mark. I don't think you have to join the army thinking what you're going to do. And I don't think I made a decision until I hit the 10-year mark because I enlisted for 4 years and I was like, now I want to try to be a Green Beret. So I enlisted for 4 more years. And so the other thing about the army is if you're in a profession that's in high demand, like a Chinese linguist, a Green Beret, a ranger, a cyber guy, there's different people, different professions are in demand at different times in the army, depending on what's going on in the world. They'll offer you a bonus to re-enlist. So after I became a Green Beret, when I came up to my enlistment time, my 4-year mark, you sign a contract for another 4 or 6 years. And at the end of that year, you get to assessed for whether you want to stay in or not. And they may try to bribe you by saying, hey, there's a bonus if you want to sign up. And if you sign up for 4 years, you get this much. But if you sign up for 6 years, we'll give you 5,000 more. So there's always something in it for you. The second time, when I signed up to go to the Green Berets, I got a bonus for that. And then the second time, so I went to the Green Beret training, came out as a Green Beret. And when I finished those 4 years, I signed up for another bonus and they gave me a free knife. And so I got a free knife and some money to stay in for another 4 years. And by then I did 12. So I was like, obviously I'm going to stay in. But at some point, at 15 years, they stopped giving like the bonuses because they're like, you're going to stay until they're 20 now. So why should we throw you in the extras? However, at 20, they gave me another bonus because they wanted me to stay in as a senior manager. And a lot of people were getting out at the time. So they gave me $100,000 here. Oh, hey, if you want to stay in for 5 more years, I'm like, yeah, I can. And so depending on your job, they may make it way worth your time to stay in. Now, something that wasn't available when I came in, it didn't become available till 7 or 8 years ago, is something it's equivalent to the 401ks where they match your IRA investments and stuff like that. So that just started. And I don't know all the details of it, but you can start it from being a private. When you sign the basic training, you're like, I want to put so much percent into it's called the TSP, which is the selected stocks that you can use for your 401k or whatever. And so you choose which ones you want to do, whether you want a low risk, middle risk, or high risk and stuff like that. And they'll match it up depending on your rank and how much time in the military. They have different matches. So that's something that wasn't available. So when I came in, if you didn't do 20, you didn't get anything for retirement unless you had something on the outside. You had an IRA or a Roth IRA on the outside of the military that had nothing to do with your job. So if you had the knowledge and someone had recommended that this is a good way to go because you didn't really as an 18-year-old, what did you know about IRAs? Then you would do that. If you didn't, then you didn't do anything. And if you decided to get out before 20, you didn't have anything saved for retirement, unless whatever you saved yourself, but you didn't have a retirement plan, an IRA or anything like that. But now they implemented that, you can actually have a big nest egg in that TSP fund before you get out at 10 years, at 5 years, at 15 years, and you can move on and you can move it. If you get another job that offers a 401k, you can move that into theirs, just like you can do it with anyone else when you move from jobs to jobs with your tax exempt IRAs and stuff like that.
We've talked in other episodes about how to think about managing your finances over the course of a long time and really just using the power of time to your advantage. If you think in 10 and 20-year time horizons, you can do a lot if you are able to be sensible and manage your expenses, save what you can. And having a place to invest in, like this TSP or whatever it's called, is really important. So no matter what career you choose and how much you're making, getting into the mindset of saving money for yourself and putting it aside and investing it over the long term is what's going to give you flexibility later in life, so that when you want to make a change and you're 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever it is, you'll be in a much better position to do so. You were going to say something, but the question I'm just curious about when you were talking is, any idea how many people put in their 20 and then either A, fully retire, or B, go on to do something else? Because if you're 40 or 45, I guess you could theoretically go do another 20-year career somewhere.
I say most people that do 20 and sometimes at some point in my career, they also offered 15-year retirements
Hmm.
because they just had too many in a certain rank and they were downsizing at the time because it was before 9/11. And they just said, hey, if you're in the following professions, the following ranks over the next 6 months, we'll be taking applications for early retirement at 15 years. So it luck of the draw. And I don't know the answer to your question statistically, but you have to actually progress in ranks, and you can't, if you never reach like the sixth level of enlisted, I don't know if it's sixth or seventh. At one time it was sixth, but I don't know if that's still true. You could never retire. You weren't allowed to retire because if you were at the fifth level rank at 15 years, they're like, you're obviously not management material. We don't need you. But there's more than one way not to get promoted. You can be doing great in your job, but you're overweight. You can't get promoted if you're overweight. You can be, so there's different things that can hold you back because there's, once again, what we talked about in another episode, which was only 70% of the people that are age eligible to join the army can actually join the army because they're overweight. They have mental issues. They did drugs. They were a criminal, something like that. So those people that get in, they still have to maintain all those things in order to get promoted. And there's a checklist like, hey, did you pass your physical training test? Are you overweight? Do you have did you do anything else wrong that's on your record? Stuff like that. So if you don't get promoted in a timely manner through your career, you won't even be eligible for retirement. And then once you get there, you're going to get, at 20 years, you're going to get, it was 50% for me, but now it's 40%. So once they started the 401k, they lowered it to 40% at the 20-year mark.
40%.
So of your base pay.
So a pension, that you're getting a defined pension amount
Right.
upon retirement.
Yeah. So you're getting a pension, which is probably becoming less and less common, right, in the world. Like corporation pensions were pretty common back in my dad's day, but I don't think it's very
They're
common
almost
nowadays.
unheard of now, right? The only place you find pensions still being paid out, now there's people who have a legacy from before in private business, but it's very rare. So having that is actually a pretty significant financial benefit.
Yeah. So you get a pension and so when I came in, I know you start at 40 now. And when I came in, you got 50 at 20 years. And every year after you got 2.5% to a maximum of 75%.
Wow.
So at 30 years, you get 75% of your base pay. And since you have to have certain ranks to get to that level, even when you get to 20-year level, at 22 years, if you're not at a certain rank, they also kick you out. So when you're getting to 30 years, you're already at a pretty high rank, making whatever, $10,000, $8,000. So your pension's not too bad. You still get taxed on your pension, but
Welcome to the real world.
so you get a pension and you get your 401k that you've been investing in the military that's been
Right.
matched.
Whatever you
So
saved.
nowadays, when they started the pension or the 401k plan, I was like 3 years from retirement and it wasn't an option. They said, you can't even start now if you wanted to. We're not going to give you the option. But anyone new coming in could feasibly retire at 30 years, get 60% and also their pension or also their
This is
401k as well.
this is probably neither here nor there, but I'm just curious if you are willing to share. Did you, knowing that you were working towards a pension, did you anyway separately save for some of your pay yourself and invest it, even though you didn't have a 401k? Or did you say, I'm going to have my pension, that's good enough?
I didn't have a lot of good mentors and I tried a couple times and then I was like, what am I doing? And I want to buy a truck. And so I take it out and take the loss of paying the extra money because I'm stupid. I didn't actually save anything in an IRA or a Roth IRA or anything. I did a lot of research in my later life and I could never decide whether I wanted to start that late in my life, if it was worth it or not. And I never looked into it. But, and we may have talked about this. I can't remember if we talked about this in a previous one, but I did mentor the people underneath me who were coming in the
Yes.
military. And I did not do this. You should do this. And I know some people did follow my advice. And one person in specific got out after 10 years with over 200 grand in his accounts. So yeah, obviously it can work.
Well, Randy, the next best thing you could do if you didn't do everything right yourself is to take the lessons and share them with others, as you've been doing in a variety of ways. So that is actually one of the things we hope comes out of people listening to our podcast is they get the sense that, yeah, of course we haven't done everything right, but at this point in our careers and our lives, we're trying to distill away some of the lessons and say, okay, here's how some perspectives for you to think about as you decide the pros and cons of how you want to approach your own life. And it's never to say this is how you should do it or this is the right way to do it. It's more, you referred earlier to people who do their research and think a little bit about tactically how they want to go about the next stage in their careers. And that's a little bit, I think, what we're ultimately suggesting is that people do some research, think about it, get information from various sources. And certainly an overlooked, but I think really valuable source is the experience of people who've done it before you. It is actually okay to listen to people who've done so for 20 years and to find out what would you advise. That's such a wonderful source. And just take it though as a data point. Just because you did it one way, Randy, doesn't mean that somebody else is going to think I have to do it that way. It's a little bit like what Confucius supposedly said, if I'm walking with two men, I can learn something from each of them. From the one, I learn what not to do, and from the other one, I learn what to do. You can learn from any kind of mentor. So, as between you and me, I'm not going to say which one people should learn from, the positive lesson and the negative lesson. But yeah, just because you didn't save, I didn't mean to put you in a spot there by raising that. I wasn't sure what you were going to say. You're now helping people figure out, hey, yeah, go ahead, take that advantage while you're young and you'll be happy you did it later.
I think I'd just like to add the financial aspects of the military it all depends on you, what you want to do, how you plan and figure it out. Coming in to do a job that you enjoy and researching it and finding people that are doing it. How hard is that with social media nowadays? Most people got their LinkedIn stuff in. There's Quora that has just people willing to spill their guts on there for whatever your question is. I see stuff like all the time. I want to be helicopter mechanic. Can anyone tell me what that's like in the military or the Air Force or whatever? And people will answer your question. And finding people on Facebook that have that job and saying, hey, I like that. In fact, I think some of the recruiters nowadays, when you decide on what you want to do, they'll put you in touch with somebody and you can talk to them about what they do on a daily basis and what they're learning and stuff like that. So that's one thing. Second of all, there's all these ways to make additional money. I think the military pays pretty good for what you're an 18-year-old making $2,000 a month, and they teach you your job, and then it raises within a year or 2 years. You're going to get two big raises. That's significant. But if you go to airborne, you're making an extra $150 a month, which if you're only making $2,000 a month, that's almost 8% right there. If you go into the Green Berets, you're making an extra $325 a month. And plus you're going to get demo pay of another 150. So you're going to make $475. And if you go to a scuba team, you make an extra $300 a month. And if you speak a language fluently, you'll get an extra $300 a month. If you speak a second language, you may get an extra $300 depending on where you're working. So all that stuff adds up and may double your salary if you want to do those jobs. And then if you come in and think about the bonuses that you get every 3 or 4 years, you get a $40,000 bonus every 4 years because you're in a high demand job. That's something else to roll into the mix. And then if you enlist for a hard to get job and you qualify for it, because not everyone's qualifying for it. That's why they're offering bonuses. They need a certain scores in their tests and they need an affinity for it and stuff like that. And my son is National Guard. He came in, he got a $20,000 bonus. for finishing basic training in IT. That's pretty significant. If you look at it that way from a financial point of view, and depending what your goal is, whether your goal is to retire and get a 401k. So when you retire, you don't have to work for anybody anymore. And you may have enough money in the bank to start your own business. If that's what you want to do, go live in a van, go live on a farm, whatever you want to do. There's ways to do all that if you want to. If you make a plan, you can go like me and just come in willy nilly and not have an idea. And you can probably get away with that for 3 or 4 years while you're trying to figure out your life and make a plan. But if you decide to make a career out of the military, or even if you decide to stay for 10 years or whatever you want to do, if you plan your finances within the military and arena, if you take a job where you're going to combat zones, are funny enough, are strange because Kuwait's a combat zone, but we were never fighting in Kuwait. And it was just near Iraq, which could have been attacked again, I guess. But if you're in Kuwait, you're considered in a combat zone. Combat zone, you're not paying taxes. You're also getting combat pay, which is another $200 a month. And they will also give you a $10,000 loan with no interest for a year if you want it. And and there's just all kinds of additional kind of benefits that no one knows about or no one really researches. And if that's your job, then language pay can give you up to $400 a month. So if you go to Chinese linguist, you're going to come out of there making an extra $400 a month on top of your rank and everything else. So there's just a lot of ways to make more money than just the base pay. And the fact that you get a kind of a housing allowance, once you reach a certain rank, or once you're married, now you can start investing in real estate. You're going to get a housing allowance. You can use it to pay for the house. And then when you move, you can rent that and buy a house in the next place with the new housing allowance or something like that. Obviously, you're going to have to figure it all out and make sure that you don't get into debt and make your payments and stuff. But I've met a couple people who moved 5 or 6 times in their career, bought a new house in each location using the GI Bill, the VA loan. So they get it at a really low interest rate. And now they have 5 houses and making passive income. So that's another way to look at that. I never thought of that. I know when I was in the Rangers, my squad leader did, and he actually rented the rooms in his house out as well as buying the property with the VA loan. And so he wasn't even making a mortgage payment because he was renting the houses out to single soldiers who just wanted to get out of the barracks. So anyway, there's all kinds of ways to use the system in your favor and have a kind of a good financial ending to your military career.
All right. That's probably also a good note for us to end this episode, Randy. I think you've given a good description of some of the things that people should think about during their career and ways to navigate to have a successful career with the military. You've certainly given some inspiration for why a person should absolutely be encouraged to think that there's a way to do it. So thanks for that. Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. We appreciate you being here. Leave us some comments if you have further questions that we haven't already addressed, and we're happy to take it up in a future episode.
All right. See you guys later.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.